Welcome to the Colorful Clipboard, where we discuss the building blocks of making dough in childcare. I'm Kate.
And I'm Carrie.
Welcome back to Colorful Clipboard. And today, Carrie and I are going to talk to you a little bit about heroes, cops, robbers, Indians, cowboys, all those fun things. And it is a whole lot more than just boys being boys. Carrie, talk to me about that sentence. Because first of all, that sentence drives me crazy. And I know you have had parents telling you that for years.
Yeah. What they mean from a developmental point of view when they say boys will be boys is that typically developing male mammals have a stronger need for gross motor activity when they are young than typically developing female mammals. But
wait. I just want to stop because yes, there's that presumption that most of the folks listening understand kind of what you mean by gross motor. But give me an example of when we start talking about big gross motor and what that need is. Can you tell me, what is gross motor and what is the need? What do you mean by that statement?
So through evolution in mammals, the males are typically larger and they typically have to defend their troop, their group, whatever, from predators. So in order to develop those large muscles on their larger frames, they have to roughhouse more. So you see that with, if you have a dog that has a litter or a cat that has a litter, you will notice that the male kittens and puppies are more active than the female kittens and puppies typically. And in humans, that means climbing, running, jumping, those things, and also vocalizing. So instead of talking, screaming and yelling, because all of those are things that in lesser evolved primates are used to scare off predators. So part of it is
we can
biology.
Just all watch Tarzan and get an idea what we're supposed to see.
Yeah. So I mean,
I'm having scenes. Yes.
Right. So there's a biological imperative behind this, right? But that doesn't mean that girls don't run, they don't jump, they don't climb, they don't vocalize. Like they do it also. They just don't typically do it quite as much as the boys. And I see far too frequently when people use that term, boys will be boys, what they're saying is we don't need to hold these children accountable for their actions because they were born with a Y chromosome, which is baloney. They still need to be held accountable to their actions, even though there's a developmental imperative. There's a developmental imperative for females to communicate verbally, but we do not let that 4-year-old child talk incessantly all day that is female. So we shouldn't allow the 3-year-old boy to run and jump incessantly because he is a boy. Am I being too preachy here?
Huh?
Am I being too preachy here?
Well, what I was going to say is just because they're running and jumping, it doesn't mean that it also can't be productive. I mean, we all know what happens to teenage boys as they start getting that round of testosterone, or preteen boys, and how much they really need to be out. Again, running, jumping, climbing, really need to be doing... They need to be working. They need to be out doing manual labor.
Well, but it's also finding out what is actually dangerous. So from a director perspective, I see too often directors saying, there will be no roughhousing in my program. There will be no gunplay. And that's not healthy either. So letting them run rampant isn't good, and completely shutting it down isn't good.
Right. So let's before we get into the gunplay, because I know you and I want to make sure that we touch base on that. Let's talk a little bit more about, as a director who's helping your teachers, even helping the parents kind of understand what's going on, both from an ages and stages standpoint, and how to work that in. You had a center playground that I think was perfect for this, early on in your life as a director. Well, maybe not early on, but it was early. And it was a pirate ship. And, what little kid, doesn't love the concept of being on a pirate ship? I mean, let's look at Peter Pan. He was a kid that never grew up, right? So there's all kinds of things. And if you've ever watched Pirates of the Caribbean, again, more characters that don't grow up and love to swing and climb and chase each other.
Well, and then you also have the Little Mermaid stories. So you had a lot of ability to have dramatic play with that playscape, definitely.
Absolutely. So dramatic play is absolutely one way to work in kind of what you're talking about. But what are some other ways that you, as the director, could help parents and teachers incorporate this need, this biological need, into their day? What are some things that can be done?
So on the average day, it is in part, being outside for an hour to an hour and a half every day so that gross motor skill needs can be met. But we do have those days where it's 110 for a week and a half, and we don't want to go outside for an hour and a half because that's just torture for everyone. Or days when, you have a freak snowstorm.
What?
And so we've got to figure out ways that every classroom can have okay, this is the third day with no outdoor time. What are we going to do to burn off that energy? And so, I again go back to dramatic play, and I'm like, okay, let's play like we are cats and dogs. And so we put we put stuff away that's going to fall off of the shelves, and we crawl around the floor like we're cats and we're dogs. And maybe the caregivers are dog catchers and cat catchers, and they're going to come and catch you and take you to the pound and until your human parents can find you. And what's the foxes and the hares? That's another game that you can play in a classroom. You don't have to have a multi-purpose room for that game. Toddlers playing hide and seek is one of the funniest things you'll ever see. If you haven't had hide and seek in your toddler classroom, you are missing out on a lot of hilarity because they're not good at it, but they think they are, and it's hilarious
because they can't see you, so they're sure you can't see
right.
them.
But the other toddlers, if they can't see their friends' faces, they don't realize that those legs are from their friend. So both sides, both the hiders and the seekers, are not very good in that toddler classroom, but it's a great gross motor activity to get some of those wiggles out.
There's also a reason
you
why...
lived in an RV with 4 children. What are some of the things that you did?
Well, so what I was going to say is there are some basic reasons why, growing up, especially if you're, 50 or older, or maybe even some of your 40s. When I grew up, we had, recess was a good hour and a half every day. Plus we had gym every day. There was a reason why these activities occurred when they did, as far as the time of day and the amount of time. And so we have the unique ability in early childcare to continue to offer a lot of outdoor time. We are not bound to state testing or somebody telling us what we need to schedule our day like. So if you do find that you have a classroom that has a lot more Y chromosomes, or they're going a little nuts. I think one thing that I'd really encourage your staff to do if you're a director is to meet with you and to have conversations with you as a director about maybe changing up the schedule a little bit and trying to meet the needs of your kids in your classroom. Just like if you have a lot of early readers and you have a preschool classroom, allowing maybe more quiet time or more time for that reading or more hands-on building time for the kinetic learners. But if you have those kids and maybe it's, even how certain nap times fall, I've seen centers and programs get really creative on the schedule to help with some of this, because if the kids aren't given an outlet, then you end up with a whole lot of other issues. And so you have to decide, is it giving them an opportunity to run around and to climb and to jump, teaching them how to do that? So there is a reason why, especially with, very cautious parents nowadays, we see more and more kids tumble gyms, whether it's the little gym for gymnastics and
The buses that'll pull up to your daycare center that are full of gymnastics equipment?
Absolutely. So there are facilities that are opening with everything from something like an obstacle course racing or American Ninja Warrior, depending on what your hobbies are or what you watch on TV. And a lot of those facilities now offer preschool programs. So even they're recognizing the need, and parents recognize the need for places for the kids to climb that are safe, that have some mats on the bottom. I'm sure we've all met at least one kid who's fallen off of the monkey bars and has broken an arm because although they used to be on every playground, they weren't really designed for every kid on that playground.
Right. And
right, we now have playgrounds that are built for different size kids.
yeah. And I mean, if you're not sure about how to take more of the day outside, go back and listen to our episode 23. We talk about taking your whole classroom outside, and we were talking about it primarily because the pandemic was in full swing at that time. But that doesn't mean you can't take it outside just because you have a classroom full of wiggly kids who have a lot of physical needs. And, take a moment to think about what Simone Biles would have been like as a preschooler. Would she have been able to sit through a 20-minute circle time?
Well, think about the kids, we have ballet dancers, we have other choreographers that if you read their stories, same kind of thing. So again, finding out if you have staff, you might find out that you have an after school teacher who had been a ballerina or who took years and years of ballet or jazz or hip hop, and maybe she's willing to offer informal classes to your students because even though she might be one age group and it's the other age group that needs it, again, it's a good thing. Give everybody that opportunity. It's a different teacher during the day to interact with, and she's getting their wiggles out. Kids yoga.
Yep.
And one of my favorite things, and we are going to talk a little bit about superheroes and cowboys and Indians and guns, and so
we're going to talk a lot about that.
Okay, well, I'm going to use this as our transition. There is actually on Amazon, you can buy a deck of cards that is all about exercises, and it's exercises based on different superheroes. And so literally kids can pull a card out of a deck and they have to do the Superman, and then they have to do the Spider-Man, and they have to do all these different, to them, really cool kid-based exercises. And that way, if you are a teacher who does not come from an exercising background, or you're a teacher going, yeah, I'm not doing that. It's a way to you could give a 3-year-old the opportunity to be in charge of leading some activities with his peers. And so a great opportunity can be done inside. And so when Carrie was talking about weather and being inside, one thing we really do have to remember is how many families have gone to electronic babysitters, even if that's not their intent. So even if the weather has been nice all weekend, there's probably a fairly decent chance that kid has been in front of some sort of screen. Or then again, if it was bad weather. So if you've got bad weather over a weekend and then you got a bad Monday and a bad Tuesday, even though in your program it's 2 days, that kid, it may be 4.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a reason why bouncy houses exist, trampoline parks exist, right? Like these kids are literally bouncing off the walls.
Yep.
So when we talk about exercising and we're talking about taking kids outside, we know that the natural dramatic play for most kids, or a lot of kids, are things they see on TV.
Or chase games. I mean, they're all around the world, kids play chase games. And whether, that's statues in the park or whether it's tag or some other chase games, kids are going to play chase games, and it's our job as adults to give them some rules for those chase games.
Right. So we've done chase games. And they have chase games in pools, right? Swimming pools have sharks and minnows, and we have
Marco Polo.
Absolutely, which of course both of those can be adapted for land-based versions. But when we start to think, and this is where we wanted to spend some time, we wanted to talk a little bit about superheroes, we wanted to talk about cops and robbers, and we also wanted to talk about cowboys and Indians, partially because in addition to just helping from a biological sense, we wanted to use them as ways to talk about other things that are going on in the world. And
other things that kids have to develop. Because when centers there's going to be no roughhousing and no gunplay, then they're not allowing the children who are hearing about gun violence to process that as far as the no gun play, and they're not being able to learn what you learn in rough and tumble play, which is empathy and bodily self-control, which is what you learn playing Duck, Duck, Goose or playing chase games, is that if I hit you too hard on the shoulder when we're playing Duck, Duck, Goose, you're going to yell. And so that hurt you, and I need to control my body better.
Okay, so just that little tidbit. So when I start thinking about, as a director, making sure that these are things that your staff understand, even if your staff have degrees in early childhood, sometimes these are the little connections that they forget or they miss. So make sure that you jot that down, rewind this, pull out a Post-it note. I love Post-it notes. Pull out a Post-it note, write this down. Okay, so write down that Duck, Duck, Goose has a purpose. Right?
All of those kinds of games. Yeah.
But write down what the purpose is, because again, I know teenagers who, because they were an only child or they weren't, they had a stay-at-home parent, they just didn't get some of these games. And so when I worked with some of them as they got to be into middle school and we played some of these games, they just didn't understand the concept that they were hurting a peer, because they didn't have some of those Duck, Duck, Goose, Red Rover, some of that kind of stuff.
London Bridge is falling down. So I guess take a moment to think back to some of those physical games you played as a kid. And you may not have played all of these. And if you need to go watch YouTube to figure out how to play Duck, Duck, Goose, or how to play Red Rover, or how to play London Bridge. I remember playing London Bridge I was like 10, 11, 12 years old before I stopped playing that game. And as an older elementary school, we shook the heck out of our friends playing that game, but we had good control over how strong we were so that nobody would get hurt. And we learned that because we'd been playing that game since we were in pre-K. And when they look at people, so I'm going to take a serious turn here. So everybody get prepared. Take a drink of water if you need to. Just take a moment because I'm about to take a hard left shift. So there's a guy who's really famous in Austin by the name of Charles Whitman. But most people, maybe you don't know that name. He is the first mass shooter at a school. And he was the UT Tower shooter. And psychologists were trying to figure out what happened to make him that way. What went wrong with this man? And they did an in-depth historical study of him. And he gave them permission to do analysis of his brain because he recognized that something, he had given permission in some medical form to that could happen. I guess when he was in the Army, I don't know. But they looked at his brain, his physical brain, and they did a history of his life and found out what he was like as a child, what he was like in the Army, what he was like as a student, all of this. And what they found was that he was not allowed to play when he was a child. He was not allowed to do any rough and tumble games at all. If the other kids were running around playing chase games in his neighborhood and he started to get up off of the porch, his daddy would yell at him and send him inside. None of his classmates ever remember seeing him play basketball or any rough and tumble at all. So he didn't learn the empathy for other people when you hurt them, and he didn't learn how to control his body. And they have found almost every time they have been able to do a history of a mass shooter, they have found this same thing, is that those kids did not engage in rough and tumble play because they had adults in their environment who would not let them do rough and tumble play.
Okay, so I want to make sure that what we're also not saying is that a lot of these that if you don't let the kids do this, you're going to end up with mass shooters.
No, I'm just saying that they don't develop what what you can get out of those games.
I know. I was just making sure that somebody didn't try to take a shortcut and try to say that you said something that you were not saying.
Right.
So, So when we talk about, or you ever hear somebody in early childcare talk about how play is important, everything we needed to know we learned in kindergarten. I'm going to take that a step further. Everything we ever needed to learn, we learned in kindergarten or before, because we learned how to play nicely with our friends even earlier than kindergarten. So let's talk about some of the ways that cops and robbers and cowboys and Indians, especially with everything going on in today's climate, and you talk about processing some of that. Talk to me a little bit about what that looks like, and how, as a director, is a way to include it into your curriculum without perhaps bothering parents and staff.
So, I mean, in general, it's called hero play in the research, right? Because it's somebody is the hero and somebody is the villain. Whether you're playing, a Disney movie or Pokemon or, cops and robbers or
Army men. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hero play. Who gets to be the hero? Who gets to be the bad guy? And I think part of it can be when you're introducing subjects, whether you're doing theme units or whether you just introduce topics and the kids take them from there because you're doing more of an emergent curriculum, you have to be taking a cue from what the kids are interested in. I had no desire to watch Pokemon in the 90s. None at all. But I had to take the cue from what the kids were doing and watch Pokemon so I would know what they were talking about. And I could redirect the play when it would get out of control, and correct it with what you actually do in Pokemon. So when we have situations like, I don't know what else to call it, but the rash of high publicity deaths of young people at the hands of the police, and the kids are hearing about it, even if the parents aren't talking about it on purpose in front of their child or allowing them to watch the news, they're in the next room while the parents are talking about it. So they're still hearing about it. And if they bring that into the play, into your program, you need to have your teachers be able to step in, and if they are playing as if one of them is a guy who's getting pulled out of his car or is jogging down the street and there's another person playing like they're a cop and they're going to shoot them, then the teacher needs to step in and go, if they're like, oh, is that how you think the police should act when they're helping somebody get out of a car? Should they shoot them? And you can turn that interaction on a dime. Or if the teacher can't get there fast enough, say, oh, guys, this child has been shot. We need to who's going to be the doctor? Who's going to be the EMS people? Who's going to help them get better? So the teacher needs to be able to, what's the right word, Kate? Because it's not stop the play. And
well, you used the term earlier, redirect or reconfigure, reframe.
Yeah, reframe. I like that.
So one of the things that I think is really important, probably way more than when, because it's been a long time since I have physically been in a classroom. That's the disadvantage of getting, pretty good at the business component. And it was fine with me because as my kids got older, I had, I'm going to go with just less patience for the younger ones. And so I guess until those grandma genes kick in, I'm going to definitely be up there with those high school students right now. But I think that this is a great opportunity for you as a director to truly get your staff into hands-on role play. And we've eliminated that skill from a lot of first aid, CPR. We no longer do hands-on. Everybody watches a video and we assume that you're going to learn that. This is an activity because it can be sensitive. I mean, it can be a real sensitive subject, that this is one where getting your staff to do hero play and different staff taking turns doing redirects or reframing is a great way for them to truly understand how to make that work in their classroom.
Because it is very different with, a school, like one of those 7-8-year-olds than it is with a 3-year-old. And it's very different when they are role playing the latest superhero movie that is probably not rated appropriately for them to have seen it, but they did anyway, than it is when they are acting out what they have heard about that has happened on the news or that they may have seen in their neighborhood. I mean, again, it's not just on the news.
Say. Yeah, what I was going to say is you just have to remember that, our centers are full of a diverse population. And so unless you know the religious, the socioeconomic, the political background of every family in your program, chances are you're going to have some kids whose families are going to be very different in thought process. And here you can help kids find ways to, you're not really going to talk about it. You're not going to have these in-depth discussions with 3-year-olds, right? But those 3-year-olds could have older siblings. They could have cousins, again, parents, other people they've heard talk about this subject. And giving your teachers the tools to be able to navigate some of these subjects at an age-appropriate level is really, really important. And we don't expect you to be experts at it. So these are the types of subjects and maybe the types of workshops that you need to offer for your staff. Bring in experts to teach this. Maybe get a couple of childcare centers together so you guys can split the cost. If you ever really don't know, pick up the phone and call us, because Carrie can find you that resource if she's not it. And she can help you find, and even if it's a book, I mean, there's definitely, I've seen some programs in the last, couple of years that have started to have some staff book clubs for a couple of reasons. One, the staff need to be able to talk more. I mean, diversity, equity, and inclusion are definitely, they're more than buzzwords, and they're more than things that people see on TV. And your staff need to be able to process that stuff too, right? So just because they spend all day, they spend all day with kids, they don't have grown-ups necessarily to talk to, and you don't want them talking to each other out on the playground in front of the kids. And it's definitely tempting because you're full of emotion and you need to be able to let it go. So think through different ways to be there for your staff and around all these sensitive subjects.
And we're saying this and saying that it can be difficult, but it can also be as simple as you have 2 kids and they're playing they're characters from the Batman cartoon. And one of them takes a gun out and they're the one who's trying to be Batman or Robin. And you go, oh, but Batman and Robin don't have guns. They have the batarangs. So what are you going to throw at them to trip them like Batman does? Like you can steer the behavior that simply just by knowing that Batman doesn't use guns. Like
this is coming from the comic person.
Okay, but come on. I think most adults know that Batman does not use guns. I feel pretty confident in that one.
But we do have, we have movies like the Lego Movie. We have, my kids grew up in Power Ranger Day. Even those of us who are a little older, we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So there's definitely, there are reasons why karate and yoga and kickboxing and hip hop and all of those kinds of things are being taught at younger levels, and it's because it's a way to do those big muscles.
And for the kids to feel powerful. That's why they play Hero Play, is to feel powerful. Like, nobody picked out your clothes for you today. Nobody told you that you needed to wear big girl underwear. Nobody told you what you were going to have for breakfast. Like, you got to have some agency in your day, and the average preschooler doesn't. And by being Batman or by being a dinosaur or by, being one of the Power Rangers, to date ourselves, you get to have some power. And that's what the kids are going for.
I can really date myself because, I always thought it was really cool when, we got to play West Side Story.
Charlie's Angels. Thank you very much. And we all know which one I was. So let's just move on. Okay. I was never Farrah Fawcett. It was just not in the cards. I was always Kelly. But, these are, we played those games. Like when you were a kid, you played these games. I bet you dimes to donuts, every one of you had some form of Hero Play that you played, even if it was just you were playing, the lava game or piranhas or whatever. Like, you played those games.
So it's a great opportunity. You can incorporate it in. I mean, Carrie gave great examples, I think, when she was talking about how to tie that into dramatic play. You can definitely tie it into themes or to months. You can tie it into history if you've got some older kids. There are definitely times of the year where these are things that are going to be, they're going to hear those words, so you're going to hear people talk about, police officers or military. And again, find out as much as you can about the history of families when you're doing your intake. Because it's important to know if you've got, soldiers or vets in your program, because again, those kids are going to have a very different take. If you are part of Texas, and I'm going to throw this out there just as something to think about, and Carrie and I can address this on another issue of podcast, but one reason why it's going to be important for us to really truly understand hero play and those roles of guns in the classroom is that in Texas, we have passed basically anybody can carry law. No training required.
And you don't have to declare.
And they don't have to declare. So, it's going to change things. If nothing else, it's going to change how you feel as an organization, as a business. And so we'll touch on the legalities of that. What does that mean? What can your staff do? What can your teachers do? What can your parents do?
Right.
What can they not do? And how does that work legally? So like I said, we'll talk about that at another podcast. We're not going to talk about that today, but that is kind of my thought process on why right now hero play is really, really important outside of what's going on across our country, as far as what and how things are aired on the news.
Okay, so if you have any questions about this, if you want to reach out to us, it's hello@Colorful Clipboard. If you learned anything in today's show, or if you have staff members you think could benefit from this show, please share it. We'd love some reviews on your favorite podcasting app, whether that's Spotify or Apple or Google Podcasts, wherever you're getting this, subscribe or follow, depending on the terminology on your platform.
Sounds great. We'll talk to y'all next week.
Thank you for listening to Colorful Clipboards. Connect with us on social media @Colorful Clipboard, or send us an email to hello@colorfulclipboards.
Send us your voicemail with your own questions and stories. If you want to keep learning with us, visit Texas Director, where we continue to have seminars, licensing, programs, and more.
This show has been made by me, Carrie Casey, and Kate Young, with assistance from Hallie Casey and Marie Young. If you learned something today, share the show.